kicked me out of the office because he said that I was a fire hazard in my wheelchair, and I was separated from my team. And I sent an email to the client using the F word because I was so frustrated and so angry. And then I got called into HR and said, this is one of our most important clients. Please don't upset them. And I was like, hang on a minute, I'm being prejudiced here.
That we previously had to make, because they actually put laws around all of these things and made it very complex. Whereas in fact, as you say, if you can just be as open as possible, you're going to make life better for everyone. Hi everyone, this is Simon Phillips, and this is the latest episode of The Change Show. You're very welcome. It's been a little while, but we're excited about rejigging the series and getting going again with some amazing guests. And I couldn't be any more excited than I am today at our first guest in the reboot, Toby MIldon. Lovely to see you. How you doing?
Yeah, great to see you, Simon. Thanks for inviting me along. Lovely to be here.
No, my pleasure. So Toby and I were chatting recently on his show, the Inclusive Growth Show. And I thought, but you know what? He's inspired me to get the show back on the road. And if you haven't caught that show, by the way, go and check it out. There's some amazing conversations that Toby's had there with people that really know their stuff. So if you want to go deep on some of the conversations that are affecting pretty much every organization right now, then I can't recommend a better show than that. So Toby, kick us off then. Tell us a little bit about you. Tell us about your journey to where you are today.
So professionally speaking, I am a workplace inclusion consultant. So I work with chief people officers to help them really embed a culture of inclusion within their organization. So thinking about the behaviors of the senior leadership team, thinking about the systems and structures and the policies that they've got in place. Yeah. When I left university, I actually spent the first half of my career working in technology. I was an IT consultant for Accenture. I worked in healthcare technology. I ended up at the BBC as a technical project manager. And I pivoted my career into diversity and inclusion when I worked really closely with the leadership team of our technology and engineering department of the BBC. And they were concerned at the time about the gender imbalance that we had in technology compared to the rest of the BBC. So I worked with them to create a strategy to attract and recruit more women into our technology and engineering jobs. And it started off as a 6-month secondment and it became a full-time career. I left the BBC to go and work for Deloitte, the big accountancy firm, again, looking at a culture of respect and inclusion. And then 7 years ago, I left the city and started up my own consultancy.
It was interesting, wasn't it, back then, that diversity, if you like, was limited for many organizations to just that bit around gender.
It still is. It still is. There's a false understanding that diversity begins and ends with a small subset of people. And this is a really unhelpful mindset because we are all diverse. Yeah. Every one of us. We don't have to have a particular characteristic to tick the diversity box because it's a bit like an iceberg. You can see 10% of the iceberg poking above the waterline, and these could be our most apparent or visible characteristics. So if anyone was to meet me in person, they would see that I'm a white man. They would also see that I am in a wheelchair, so I've got a physical disability. But actually 90% of our difference, our uniqueness, is hidden beneath the waterline. These can be your kind of classical traits, like you might have an invisible disability. So somebody might be dyslexic, for example, which you might not be able to see on the surface. But actually, there's loads of other characteristics, like whether somebody's an introvert or an extrovert, whether they grew up in the countryside or in the middle of the city, whether they grew up in a single parent household or not. And all of these things contribute to our lived experience and our perspective on life.
Totally. And well, I mean, I think there's a growing understanding of the range of diversity, but I don't think the practice is keeping pace. That's my observation. When I look around different aspects of business, there is an understanding that, hold on, I've got some boxes to tick, maybe. And I need to make sure that the workplace is accessible. I need to make sure that we've thought about gender and race. Let's say that those are potentially the top 3 in terms of most people's tick list when it comes to diversity. But actually, as you've highlighted there, it's way more complex than that. And if we only design our businesses around the very obvious, then we're missing out on a huge pool of talent. A good example, which picks up on one of the aspects that you mentioned. So my dad was dyslexic, but he grew up in an era where that meant that you were perceived to be slow in school. He was incredibly amazing at sitting down with the tiniest piece of paper. We'd call it the back of a fag packet, if you like, in the old days. And it was like he could work out the dimensions and the materials required and everything that it took to take something from an idea to a building. And that takes amazing mental arithmetic and understanding of 3D and all of the different aspects that it takes to bring that idea to life. But he was rejected in his day from loads of opportunities because he didn't have any qualifications. He didn't have anything to show that he actually knew anything, if you like. So his progress was incredibly slow over his career. He did some amazing things, but it was never really recognized. And what you're highlighting there is that there's still very little conscious action today to start to really understand these things and make a difference in the workplace.
Absolutely. We call that conscious inclusion. And obviously in the line of work that you do, Simon, you're probably aware of the conscious or unconscious competency framework. So first of all, you start off with you don't know what you don't know. Then you move into you know what you don't know. And then you suddenly have this like, oh my God, there's so much to learn around diversity and inclusion. It's all really overwhelming. But what you want to do is move into the conscious competence phase. From an EDI perspective, that's where it just gets embedded in your organization. And chief people officers that I work with will say things like, it's just the way that we do things around here, or it's what we are known for now, in terms of being really inclusive organizations.
Yeah.
And it is a really complex and quite overwhelming field to work in, because I think, first of all, lots of people think, well, I've got all these groups of people to satisfy. I've got women and gender. I've got people from an ethnic minority background. We've got disabled people. We've got members of the LGBTQ plus community. We've got neurodivergent folk. We've got working parents, and suddenly you start listing out all these groups of people and you think, how on earth do I keep everybody happy?
Yeah.
But actually, it's quite simple. We need to go back to some basic principles, because by doing something for one group of people, you're actually going to be making life better for everybody. So if we take, let's say as a chief people officer, you audit your recruitment process from beginning to end. And you start to think about, okay, what's the candidate experience like? Now, if I was to put myself in the shoes of somebody who's disabled, what would it be like to go through my recruitment process? And then you start to make adjustments and make improvements. But actually, at the end of that exercise, you've just made life better for everybody, whether you're disabled or not. So I think we need to move away from this siloed thinking about what do we do for particular groups of people, and go back to some basics of what are the philosophies behind inclusivity that apply to everybody.
I think you're right, because what's happened, I guess, is let's say the HR managers, the HR directors who originally put in place the policies and all of the processes to enable them to say, we can tick the box on gender in our organization. They remember how hard that was and how much of a job it was, if you like. And so they look at the range of diversities and think, that's too overwhelming. I'm not going to be able to do all of that in the same way. And they're right. It doesn't have to be done in the same way, because as you say, if you just take a very basic approach to it, which is the human approach to it, what makes, how can we ensure that this process, let's call it recruitment, how can we ensure that this process is as open as it can possibly be to all humans?
Yeah, absolutely.
Now all of a sudden I've got one job to do.
Yeah.
And and I think that's where it's almost better if you've got somebody fresh into the workplace who's having to think about this, because they're not going to come at it with all that history of how much effort it was to meet all the criteria that we previously had to make, because they actually put laws around all of these things and made it, very complex. Whereas in fact, as you say, if you can just be as open as possible, you're going to make life better for everyone.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. There's this when I worked in user experience and design at the BBC,
Mm,
there's this design philosophy where you design for the extremes. So if you imagine a bell curve of your users of a particular system, you're going to have the majority of people in the middle who
mm,
are using the system. Then you've got your extremities, and but from a user experience and design perspective, if you design for the extreme, you make life better for everybody. So
yeah.
imagine you are designing a self-service checkout system, which everybody doesn't like using in the supermarket. If you imagine putting yourselves in the shoes of, say, somebody who can't see very well, what must that experience be like?
Mm,
Because then you can design a better system for those people. But actually, in doing that, you're providing a better experience for all customers,
yep.
because there might be some other customers who are what we would call situationally impaired. So they might temporarily not be able to see properly. So
Yeah.
maybe
Yeah,
the
the
sun is
lighting.
shining through the window
Exactly. Yeah.
and causing a glare on the screen, or maybe somebody's really distracted, or somebody's forgot their glasses, they've left them at home, and things are a little bit blurry. And but we can take that philosophy in terms of creating inclusive ways of working in organizations. So if we think about your talent management process, what is it like for somebody who's got parenting or caring responsibilities
Yeah.
to progress in your organization?
Totally. Totally. And of course, the only way you're ever going to find out is to ask
Yes.
and to really listen. And you know, you and I were chatting about on your show about the importance of listening, really listening, not just superficially listening, trying to get to the heart of, so what's going to make this better for you. I love your analogy with the user experience stuff, because you know, most things, if they're going to be hugely commercially successful, they have to get the bell curve right. They have to absolutely get in the minds of that middle section, if you like, the bulk of the people. But it's only when you start to test, to tease around the edges, the stress testing, as we used to call it in different environments, that's when you start to see the things that make the final solution almost like beautiful
Mm,
to the user. So it's not just a make do type solution. It's a, this is the best solution you've ever seen, or the best game you've ever seen, or the best, you know, website you've ever seen, because you've stress tested it at the edges, haven't you?
mm,
Yeah,
definitely.
love it. So you had quite a diverse career, you know, up to the point where you set up your own business. What were the what were the things, if you like, the little war stories? Have you got any little war stories that inspired you to get on this mission? Some of them we hope will not be the case anymore, but I suspect some of them still are. Have you got any little stories there, Toby?
Yeah, I've got plenty of personal experiences. So, as a disabled person, as a wheelchair user, throughout my career, I've had situations where I felt I've been excluded, or that I didn't belong
Hmm.
to a team. Um, Equally, I've also worked with some amazing inclusive managers as well. So it's not, I don't want to paint a negative picture,
Yeah.
but there have been some experiences which made me feel like I didn't belong, and that has informed a lot of my work. And the feedback that I get from the people that I work with now say that what they like is I bring a combination of my corporate commercial experience, having worked in large organizations and being able to influence change in complex organizations, but also I bring that personal lived experience as well. So one of my early kind of career memories was that I worked in consulting. I was on client site. The building that me and my team worked in wasn't very wheelchair accessible, and the health and safety manager came and did a health and safety assessment and kicked me out of the office because he said that I was a fire hazard in my wheelchair. And I was separated from my team. They relocated me to another building on the ground floor. I wasn't able to rejoin my team for quite a while. And then progress didn't seem like anything was being done about it. And I decided one day to go back to the old office and rejoin my team, despite the advice of health and safety. And the same health and safety manager came around again and kicked me out again. And I ended up going into the disabled toilet and crying. And I sent an email to the client using the F word because I was so frustrated and so angry. And then I got called into HR and said, this is one of our most important clients. Please don't upset them. And I was like, hang on a minute, I'm being prejudiced here and I'm being told off by HR. In hindsight, I shouldn't have sent an email with the F word, but I was, in my early 20s. It was one of my first jobs. And that left a really bitter taste in my mouth, that whole experience. And it was one of the reasons why I decided to leave that particular organization and go and work somewhere else.
Yeah.
So experiences like that have influenced me because I don't want other people who are disabled like me to have to go through that experience.
Yeah.
Now, I work across the whole board. I don't just focus on disability, but I hear similar stories from colleagues with other different backgrounds and identities where they have felt excluded. And I just don't want people to have to go through that when all they're trying to do is earn a living.
Yeah. And how sad for that organization that they lost somebody incredibly talented like you. And that's the real cost of this stuff, isn't it? If you don't pay attention, if you don't think about what you're trying to achieve overall, you just lose people. So, and I've seen that happen over and over again with people with other differences that are not welcome, there's no space for them to really thrive. They just, quite often quietly leave because they've maybe learned a harsh lesson like you, that actually there's no point in this particular scenario ranting and raving about it because it's not going to affect the outcome. But equally, it's then, it's raising awareness of these things that hopefully means that the next person in a wheelchair that comes into that organization doesn't even have to have the conversation because they've already realized, hold on, we need to do this, otherwise we're going to lose talent. Not we're going to lose a person in a wheelchair. That's the key here, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So have you been inspired by anybody along the way? Has there been somebody who's maybe done something or said something that has really triggered in you? I aspire to some aspect of that.
Yeah, there's been loads of people. So some of these people I've never met, but I've read their books.
Yeah.
One of my first memories was reading Richard Branson's book about entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
And how he talked about how he was dyslexic and the struggles that he experienced with dyslexia, and how there was one line in his book where it said, I think it was his headmaster at school said, you're either going to take two paths in life. You're either going to become an entrepreneur or you're going to go to prison. And he ended up becoming obviously a very successful entrepreneur. But that really sparked the entrepreneurial side of me. I've always been entrepreneurial. When I was at school as a teenager, I used to run the school tuck shop. I used to organize, I was head of the disco committee and I used to organize the discos. And I got told off by the headmaster once for making too much profit on an event that we organized. And I was like, why am I being told off for making too much profit? Surely that's the whole point of the exercise, is to make profit. Anyway, so there's always been like this entrepreneurial side to me. From a disability perspective, there's loads of disabled people that I look up to. My friend who's got the same condition as me, her name's Baroness Jane Campbell, and she's a Baroness because she's now in the House of Lords. And she spent her career being a disability campaigner. She was instrumental in bringing the Disability Discrimination Act in 1995 into effect. So she's been a really strong role model for me.
Love it. So what apart from the sense I get from you that there's a lot of work to do, what's really inspiring you to keep doing this?
What really inspires me are, in fact, individual stories. But I go into organizations and I work with chief people officers and I help them develop their leadership teams. I help them look at their policies and their processes and things like that. And that's all important work. But what really, really motivates me is when I meet with an employee in a particular company that says something like, I took years out of my career because I decided to leave and start a family. But then when I wanted to get back into the workplace, I really struggled. People kept looking over me. They didn't think that I had the latest skill set, even though as I was raising a family, I took on like loads of other curricular activities, like I was a governor of a school or things like that. So, they weren't just sitting around twiddling their thumbs. And I was like really struggling to get back in the workplace. But because this organization has a focus on parents returning to work or that kind of thing, because of a policy that they've implemented, it's given me that opportunity. And now I've got my financial freedom back. I love going to work because I got those personal social connections, et cetera, et cetera. And it's when I hear stories like that I think, yeah, this is important work, and this is why I wake up every morning to do it.
I hear similar stories with the unpaid carers that I work with. So, many of them have been out of the workplace for years and they've lost their confidence, but they haven't lost any of their common sense. And in fact, they're probably more skilled for having taken on the role of unpaid carer than they would have been doing the same job just multiple years. So the diversity of their skill set has massively improved. But yeah, totally. Toby, one of the things that we like to do here on the Change Show is to give people little insights. So that many people that listen tell us, I'm really inspired. I want to go and make a difference, but I don't know where to start. What you've done throughout your career is strive to make a difference. What tips have you got for somebody just starting out? What would you say to the younger Toby MIldon, who wants to go and make a difference? Was there anything that you'd advise him to do maybe differently to how you've gone about it?
I would say if I was advising my younger self, I would introduce the notion of mentoring and coaching earlier than I became aware of what a coach was or what a mentor was. And to, as a young person, get a coach or a mentor to help you forge the path that you want to forge. Somebody who's been there, done that, got the t-shirt, can tell you how to take shortcuts. So that's one advice I would get. I think the other advice that I would get is follow your heart in a way. And I don't mean that in a woo-woo sense, but don't ignore your instincts or your gut intuition. Try and get a balance between what your head is telling you logically, but also what your guts or your heart is telling you intuitively is the right thing to do.
Yeah. Love it. Love it. Toby, you've been an amazing guest. I'm gonna you know that you can't get off the Change Show without sharing a track that's inspired you along the way, or makes you just feel alive when you hear it. Whatever the reason is, we want a track from you to add to the Change Show playlist. So, what have you got for us?
So, this is a song that I find quite moving. It's called "It's a Sin," which has been around for a while, but the version that I like is the collaboration between Elton John and Ollie Alexander that's quite recent.
Yeah.
And the reason why I find it quite moving is because I came out quite late in life as a gay man when I was 29, and that was after a near-death experience where I spent 2 months in a coma. And I came out of that experience thinking, I need to live a more authentic life. I have to stop hiding a big part of myself. And growing up with a disability, there was so much emphasis on my physical health and disability, and very little on my kind of psychological, or even, romantic side of life.
Yeah.
And this song just really moves me because it's a song about, a relationship between a boy and his father, and the boy going around kissing boys on the street. And it's a lovely song as well. So I would recommend that one.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, I have to confess, I haven't heard this particular version of it, so I'm really excited to go and listen to that. But so thank you for sharing that, Toby. As I said, you've shared a whole load of really great insights today. If people want to find out more, people want to get in touch, what's the best way to do that?
LinkedIn's probably the best place to start. Just search Toby MIldon in the LinkedIn search bar, and I put quite a lot of content out every week. So if anyone is interested in improving inclusivity in their organization, then they can just follow follow my content.
Fantastic. Yeah, well, I can certainly vouch for your LinkedIn content. It's always insightful, and you always take a perspective, I feel, that is pragmatic and helps people take action, which is really what it's all about, isn't it? Isn't it?
Yeah.
We can sit around and talk about this for hours, as you and I could anyway. But what really matters is what people do with this information that you're sharing. So yeah, I can thoroughly recommend that. Toby, it's been an absolute pleasure to chat with you today. So thank you for coming in and being our guest on the Change Show. Good luck with everything you're doing. And if you ever need to feel the desire to come back and share something that's going on that you feel people would benefit from, then you're always welcome. So thank you very much.
Thanks for having me, Simon.
Brilliant. Thanks, everybody. That was Toby MIldon, my special guest here on The Change Show. Send us a note. Tell us what inspired you. And don't hesitate to get in touch with Toby if you really want to go deep and find out how to make this stuff really work in your organization. I will see you back here next time. Take care.